Good afternoon, everybody. You are all very welcome to our webinar this month in celebrating Men's Health Week. So the topic today is building emotional strength, a men's health conversation. So my name is Killian and I am the development officer working with Mental Health Ireland, and I cover Clare, Limerick and North Tipperary in the Midwest of Ireland. So you're all welcome to this webinar, which is, I suppose, a really important conversation to have around Men's Health Week, emotional strength and emotional well-being. So I have a great lineup of panelists which I'll introduce to you in a moment or so, and we're going to have a good conversation. Just, I suppose, the importance of emotional well-being and the importance of connection for men around the topic of mental health and well-being. It's great to see the types of events that are happening around not just my region but around nationally as well for men and for Men's Health Week. And the theme this year is one step at a time, progress, not perfection. And I suppose the purpose of that is to take one step at a time. One step at a time, whether it's having a conversation with someone around mental health, whether it's getting a bit more physically active, whether it's just taking the next step into a career transition or whatever that looks like for the individual, and the importance of that as well. So that is why these conversations matter, to spread awareness around men's health and especially men's mental health as well, and to reduce stigma and to improve connection and reduce isolation. So the format of the webinar, it will be an hour long. There'll be plenty of time for the panelists to answer any questions that you may have. So there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you're on a phone or a laptop, you'll be able to see that. And please start, even at the start of the webinar or throughout, input some questions that you'd like the panelists to answer, and hopefully we'll be able to get to the questions that you've asked. And with that, this webinar is also recorded for the Mental Health Ireland YouTube channel and the Mental Health Ireland website, and we'll be sharing it hopefully by the start of next week. It'll be up online. Other than that, I think I've covered mainly everything. Hopefully those that are joining, you'll have a good chance to ask some questions and just enjoy this session today for Men's Health Week. I'll just go to the next slide there before I invite the panelists in. Just a little brief background of who Mental Health Ireland are, because we host a lot of webinars throughout the year, and yeah, this is one for Men's Health Week. So our mission is to educate, empower and connect communities, creating a culture where everyone is treated with respect and supported, especially when our mental health is challenged. And then we are the longest running national mental health charity, established in 1966. And our main aim is to educate, empower and connect communities. So like I was saying, I'm one of the development officers working around the Midwest, and we have three other development officers on this panel, as well as a HSC program manager for men's health, so which I'll introduce you to in a moment. We co-produce all of our resources and our workshops, which is really important, just to, I suppose, have meaningful outcomes for the workshops and the talks that we deliver in the community, that many people are involved, including people who have used the mental health services, their family members, carers and supporters and staff, all working together to help us, I suppose, create the workshops, and then they're delivered in the communities and workplaces. So that's who Mental Health Ireland are. I will stop the share, and what I'm going to do now is I will invite our panelists to come in. So Carol, Robert, Bill and Shane, you're very welcome. There'll be a couple of attendees in. So I will just get introductions going. So Carol, you're first on my screen. Do you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi. Hi, folks. Yeah, I'm Carl Spain. I am a development officer, like Killian mentioned, and the areas I cover would be Dublin North, Kildare, and West Wicklow.
Perfect. Thanks a million, Carol, and great to have you here. Shane, will I come to you next, if that's okay? Thanks, Mill.
Yeah, I'm Shane O'Donnell. I'm the program manager for men's health in the HSE, and this was my primary role is to implement the National Men's Health Action Plan.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Shane. Great to have you here and get your experience as well. That's brilliant. Robert, you're next on the screen there. If you want to say hello?
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, my name is Robert Wilson. I am the Development Officer with Mental Health Ireland for Cavan and Monaghan. So delighted to be part of the panel this afternoon and looking forward to learning myself. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Robert. And Bill, I'll come to yourself.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Bill Vaughan, and I would be a Development Officer of Mental Health Ireland up in Donegal. I've been with Mental Health Ireland about 15, 16 years now. and doing all the kind of work that you mentioned there, Killian, at the start. A lot of it around promoting mental health in everyone, and I'm delighted to be involved in this week.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Bill. Much appreciated. And sure, we will get started with the first question. So obviously the topic is around emotional strength, and I suppose it's different for everyone what that means. So the first question is, what does emotional strength mean to you? Carl, I'll come to yourself first if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Killian. I suppose when I think of emotional strength, I think of the ability to stay connected to yourself. So to understand what's going on in your body, what's going on in your mind, and having that awareness that something might be changing. And I suppose with the awareness piece, then it's about what are you going to do and what actions you're going to take. I suppose it's also staying true to your values. So it's just kind of understanding what's happening, like having those kind of, whether it's a flag system or a traffic light system, just understanding what stress, what anxiety is coming your way, whether that's in the work, community, the home, the family place, and just having the awareness to feel it in your body, feel it in your mind, and then put an action plan in place.
That's brilliant, Carol. Yeah, just the word that stands out is awareness, just awareness how we're feeling and what we can do in the moment if we're feeling a bit under pressure or stress as well. So that's bang on. Thanks a million. Shane, I'll come to yourself.
Yeah, I suppose it's changed for me over time, but at the moment, emotional strength for me would be around being able to identify what's going on. So identifying what's going on myself, but also not beating my kind of you know, there's that kind of what is wrong. I can't seem to figure that out. So I think giving myself space around that, I think being able to um I suppose identify resources that are supportive for me, routine would be really helpful in that. And then, recognizing when I need additional support, when I need connecting with other people, what keeps me well, and just it's similar to what Carl was saying, just that sense of awareness. How am I in myself? What might I need at any time? So I suppose thinking about traditional strength in terms of weight training or something like it's not just about how you can lift the heaviest weight. You need to know the technique. You need to know different types and ways of doing it. So it's not all just the one thing. And even with your muscles, they need to experience an exposure. They need to recover. There's loads of different elements to it. So, even within that idea of strength, it's just bigger than resilience. It's recovery, it's flexibility. There's just so much more to it.
Yeah, I like that. Even just around like when you're working out in the gym, there's so many different exercises you could do. So relating that to mental health, there's so many things that we can do. It's not just one thing that supports our mental health. There's lots of different things as well. That's what I'm grasping for that, Shane. So that's really good. Bill, I'll come to yourself if that's okay. Just on the question, what does emotional strength mean to you?
Emotional strength to me is uh, about self-awareness around the whole area of your emotions. And I would kind of explain it like, the emotions are like the horse, and we are the rider on the horse. And I would say that quite a lot of us go into adulthood not having a clue how to manage the horse. In other words, our emotions. Because we're not taught basically. We don't look at it in fine detail. So, the emotional resilience then in adulthood is about realizing that and learning how to recognize and manage your emotions. Because when we do that, uh, it makes life a lot easier. Whereas when we don't, you've all kinds of trouble happens. Relationship breakup can happen. It can affect sleep. It can affect other physical areas too. So emotional resilience to me is hugely important, but yet not really explored enough in life at the minute.
That's really good. And we might come back to that, Bill. That's really important of how to, I suppose, develop those skills to, I suppose, manage our emotions at different stages of life as well. So we'll come back to that. It's food for thought for later on. So thank you for that. Robert, we'll come to yourself on the question and then we'll move on to the next one. Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose for me, yeah, I agree with what's been said so far. I like the analogy of the horse. But to me, it's about recognizing and acknowledging your emotions, being comfortable with your emotions, and being able to react appropriately to the situations and circumstances that you come across, and recognizing that there are times when it's appropriate to be sad. There's times it's appropriate, you know, well, grief itself is a combination of different emotions, but there are times when that's the appropriate response, and that's okay. And being able to recognize that and to name it is very much part of emotional strength.
That's really good. Just naming it if we are feeling a bit down or stressed, it's just not kind of just brushing it aside, but just actually saying to someone or to ourselves that I'm feeling a bit down, and it's just, yeah, trying to get the support to help along the way as well. So that's really, really good, Robert. The next question is around, has your idea of emotional strength changed over time? And that kind of touched on what you were kind of saying a little bit, Bill. Will I get you to come in maybe on that question first? So has your idea of emotional strength changed over time?
Oh, definitely. Um, I, up until I would say my 20s, I wouldn't have had a clue about emotional strength. I wouldn't have known what to kind of say about it. Uh, I wouldn't have been very self-aware. Uh, and then through my 20s, I had a lot of challenges with anxiety and depression. So I was forced to go looking for uh, answers as to what was wrong with me. And it was only then that I began to kind of find out more about, you know, the importance of self-awareness, the importance of recognize your emotions, how to start expressing your emotions, because I wasn't very good at that. So that opened up a whole world that I didn't know, uh, which which is this area of emotional resilience. So, you know, my understanding of it now is is much different back then, and it's growing all the time because I think you're learning all the time. You're learning from your emotions. You're learning from how you handle different situations. You know, every day, particularly the challenging ones. So, you know, and I think it's nearly you start to understand that, well, that's actually part of growing in life is you keep learning as life goes on.
That's brilliant, Bill. Yeah, and I suppose the challenges that we do face, there's always maybe a lesson in them that can help us for maybe a future challenge that we face as well. So I really like that. That's great. Shane, I'll come to yourself on the question. Has your idea of emotional strength changed over time?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think similar to Bill, I would have had challenges with anxiety and depression. Not that I knew those words then when I was in my teenage years, and I suppose into my early 20s as well. And um, like I went to counseling a few times throughout my childhood and adolescence, and I engaged with it, but I still wasn't adept in trying to explain how I was feeling or what was wrong. I didn't have the language to do that really. Um, it wasn't until actually I started studying in the area of men's health and conducting research through listening to other men's experiences and hearing them talk about their own struggles that I started to find the language and the experience, probably because I was being exposed to it, of being able to articulate how I'm feeling or why I might be feeling a certain way. So, that kind of brought me into that idea of masculinities and man up and, all the kind of things we hear when we're young and hear when we're old, and how that influences how we engage with mental health or don't as a man. I suppose over time, then I became more attuned to identifying how I was feeling, and trying to, like I said at the start, figure out what kind of tools do I have in my toolbox that can help me with these feelings. I then reached a point, I think, Killian, where I was I'd get frustrated if I couldn't identify what I was feeling, because I was almost too logical. Often when people talk about mindfulness, it's like your emotions are like clouds, let them go by. But I was nearly trying to pull the cloud down and go, what are you made of? Why is this here? Whereas as I grew even more over time, more recently, it is that kind of cliche of letting the cloud pass. Oh, there it is. There's the emotion. why might I be feeling that? I'm not sure, maybe I am sure, and let it pass. So to me, that's how I've grown and how it's changed over time. It doesn't mean that I've reached this place where I never feel those masculine norms or big boys don't cry or any of those. I still feel those, and at times I don't get it right. But I suppose it's the pursuit of keep trying and keep trying to figure it out. Of trying to have the pursuit of more self awareness and learn about yourself and how you react in the world around you.
That's excellent, Shane. Thanks for your honesty as well. It's yeah, the life is a learning. I suppose it's a learning opportunity, but every day is a school day about how we are feeling, our emotions, our thoughts, and everything else. And it's the awareness around it. Like we might need a different mental health tool at one particular day, and then the next day might be totally different as well. But I like what you're talking about, the mindfulness and the clouds, and yeah, that's interesting as well. They're trying to figure out thoughts and everything else. So that's really, really good. Carol, I'll come to yourself on the question.
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah,
Billy.
that'll be it then. Yeah.
I love the reflection from Bill and Shane. I love the whole piece around curiosity. So that word opens up a myriad of, being curious about yourself and curious about others, obviously, but finding out what works for you. I suppose, like, when you get the question around, like, what has it changed? I definitely think it has. The old, mantra of the old beliefs versus the new beliefs. The old mantra of, whatever, man up, like Shane's saying, or not showing a sign of weakness, sorting it out yourself. I'll be grand. That definitely, I see, it definitely, and certainly from my perspective, has changed around letting people in, being open to trying to come up with a group solution, or if you like, a family solution, whatever. I suppose, like, the whole piece that we're talking about today is around the whole piece around progress over perfection is very important. I suppose, like, on reflection, then, when I hear the two gentlemen talking about their upbringing, like, I think, in my early 20s, I had an awakening, and it was a reflection of the previous 20 years, that whatever happened in the childhood. And I suppose, like, that was when I spent from, say, 10 till about 40 in a male dominated area of the sport world, right? So in male dressing rooms, football pitches, shouting at referees, whatever. Not that I was, but, like, those environments those kind of male driven masculinity could be toxic to a certain extent. But I suppose I had a pull back then and an awakening that this wasn't working for me, whatever the pub culture, whatever it was, just the kind of bottling things up culture, wasn't working for me. And I had that awakening in my early 20s, and I started doing my kind of curious piece, what's going on, what's happening inside this head, and working things out. And I found out what would work well for me. That what works well for me is this question I still ask myself pretty much every single day, and I live by that kind of live in the present. And trying to figure out, what do I need right now? Those questions pop up in all the workshops, all the chats and talks I would do for Mental Health Ireland, and with my friend group. Yes, look, there's more to come on that, but that's kind of where I am with the change. Has it changed? Yeah, the answer is definitely yes.
It's great, Carol, and like it's such an important question about asking yourself the reflective piece of what do I need right now. If you're feeling a bit down or stressed or happy, even it's just all depends on where you are. That's a really good reflective question to have. And kind of what you're talking about leads us nicely on to the next question, and it is: what are some of the signs that you may notice in yourself or others that stress or pressure is building up? And if there's any examples you'd like to give, that would be great. Robert, I will come to yourself first, if that's okay.
Yep, thanks, Killian. I suppose when it comes to stress, stress will manifest itself one way or another, and it can affect our physical well-being. With different people, it might be different, but you aches and pains and all sorts of things that go wrong. Also, your mood, your concentration. For me, I would say probably low mood when I'm under stress and pressure. And so fortunately, I have a barometer for stress. I actually have two. They're called teenagers, and they'll soon call me out if they'll be what's wrong with you today, or what are you so grumpy about, that kind of thing. And that will be sort of, to me, that's a warning sign that stress is building up. And even if I'm not necessarily aware of it myself, people around me are maybe starting to get it, and that's when I start to get it back. So yeah, it's useful having teenagers to keep you right in that regard. But yeah, physically too, and I suppose It's well documented. Like with cardiovascular issues, can be manifested by stress. So yeah, definitely physical signs. Um, of all everyone's different, and it will manifest itself differently. But stress will manifest itself, and very often people maybe aren't even just aware of the signs and carry on until something gives. So it is important to be aware of what the triggers are for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant, Robert. And even around, like, at least you have other people in your life that notice when you are a bit stressed or under pressure as well. So it's great to have that support as well in life, just because we may not notice the signs or everything else stress at particular times. So that's great to have. Bill, I'll come to yourself if that's okay. A question.
Yeah. Signs for myself that I've learned over the years would be sleep would be one. I would start to get more nightmares and kind of feeling as if I didn't get a night's sleep at all when I would wake up. So that kind of thing. Forgetting stuff. So it would nearly feel like the mind starting to not flow as it does when the form's good. Uh, uh, it'd be harder. Speaking of emotions, it'd be harder to. I would notice it'd be harder to control the more uncomfortable emotions like anger, frustration. And they would be exaggerated. So I might get annoyed at something, something stupid like dropping the keys. Maybe I'm getting into the car and I drop the keys, and that might annoy me much more than what it should. And they are kind of signs, and like where I would be better now is at noticing those signs. Where years ago I wouldn't, when I wouldn't have been as self-aware. I would have just been in the moment and just been annoyed at dropping the keys. I would have been annoyed at people around me and blaming more. Where now I find I'm more clued in to what those signs are, and even at where are they on the timeline. So if it's getting to the more serious signs, and I'm not doing anything about it, I kind of feel to myself, well, Bill, what do you expect? You know from before, if you're going to ignore it, where it's going to end up. So I'm getting better at doing something, being proactive earlier. And then just to use the situation for a plug, we have, as you know, the Taking Action courses that are starting soon all around the country. And as part of those courses, we explore warning signs of when the stress is building up, and more importantly, then what to do about it, what you can do about it. So that'll be me, Killian.
That's great, Bill. And then just a follow-up question. Do you think with experience you've learned like this to notice with the keys dropping that you're more self-aware now than maybe 10, 15 years ago, that you can pinpoint it faster maybe than long ago? Yeah. What do you think?
Oh yeah, 100%. And now that's not to say that I always, you know, uh, handle it very well. We're all human, and it's sort of like losing weight, where you think, all right, I need to lose weight or stuff like that, but you get a bit lazy with the stuff like, right, I only cream buns. I don't think I'll go for a walk today because it's wet and stuff like that, and those habits can sneak back in and affect the weight. So I've learned to be gentle. I think one of the lads said that earlier on, to be gentle with myself too, and not, not make a tough situation worse by beating myself up.
Yeah, such an important word even to be gentle with ourselves, you know. Really, really good,
Oh
Bill.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Shane, will I come to yourself just on the question on the signs that you may notice in yourself on stress or
Yeah,
pressure?
I think earlier in my life when I wasn't fully attuned or as attuned to my emotions, I would have identified a lot with the physical symptoms, like particularly around anxiety. I would always notice those first. Feel sick. I'd feel, that really heavy legs, I'd be kind of agitated, rubbing your legs, kind of tapping your hands, that kind of thing. That was just for me, like the physical symptoms I'd start to notice. I think as well, like more recently, it's a drop in habits. It's like, it's are the things that you usually always do when they start changing, like usually go for a walk most days and then you haven't done it for a week, checking in with yourself, like what's going on there? Am I busy or is this an excuse for something else? And, just being curious. Um, yeah, I think as well, like, that my mind kind of running at 100 miles an hour, constantly worrying about something that might not happen, like that quote, a man who worries more before it's necessary, worries more than is necessary, like just that kind of racing thoughts kind of thing. So, but yeah, I think, I suppose now I'm like what Bill said, much better at catching those thoughts earlier, being more curious about them and being more gentle with myself about them. Again, I sound like a broken record, but like the key learning for me was sometimes I can't always figure out what's wrong with me, because I used to get frustrated at that as well. And the world is a challenging place sometimes, and sometimes you can't just put your finger on the one thing that's wrong. So it's just to let yourself sometimes sit with those feelings. And you might know Lorcan Brennan, who works in the Men's Development Network, but he told me a story of someone who said something wise to him once. And he said, "That's enough crying for today. You can do a bit more tomorrow." And it's that idea of being allowing yourself to be emotionally expressive, but then in another way, getting up and getting on with it and trying again tomorrow, and allowing yourself that space tomorrow. And I think as well, like a big learning, we live in a culture now where we're almost treating ourselves as humans as like this kind of productivity machine. A quarter of the top three things you can do to improve your sleep. What's the five things you can do to beat all this? And like that's so much noise. There's no space for letting yourself sit with a challenging emotion or a challenging time with that. Like, I don't know if you've ever listened to Stephen Bartlett's podcast, I Ever CEO. He had a talk about how he drank 3 glasses of wine once and his whole week was ruined. Like we're not robots. We don't live like that. So just giving yourself that space as well.
That's brilliant, Shane. Just what I was thinking there. How do we normalize that, like with men, like that, to sit with our with in discomfort, maybe with our thoughts, maybe if we are struggling, and that to go again the next day, and it's trying to not to put a brave face on, but just to sit with those emotions and just allow it to be okay. That it's totally acceptable to do it.
Yeah.
I think that's such a vital thing to normalize. And just, do you have any additional thoughts? I think it's good information.
I think there's an element of bravery to sit with the emotions because they're uncomfortable, like they're difficult, they're challenging. Yeah, like men grow up with a lot of ideas, not only around emotional strength, but that you should be logical and everything will follow in step A, B, C, and you should be able to figure everything out. And sometimes you can't figure them out. So there's an element of courage and bravery in just feeling that, but having the supports around you then as well to connect in with someone if they become too much, or also, having a plan for, or I'm going to sit with these thoughts, but I'm going to get out tomorrow and I'm going to pick back up the walking, or I'm going to pick back up the things that keep me well. So it's that balance of the doing that keeps you well, do the do that keeps you well, but also like feel it and sit with it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super. That's brilliant, Shane. Thanks for that and the additional thoughts on it as well.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Any? Yeah, absolutely. Is there any other follow up on the question, Carol? Did I come to yourself on it?
Yeah,
Signs. Yeah. Do you want to have it? Yeah, go for
some
it.
great nuggets being shared there by the gents. Like I would have the kind of, the old way of being like, you feel stuff in your body. Absolutely, the body before your mind. Most likely, it shows up, right? But I suppose what I would then look at is stuff like Bill mentioned there about being irritable and being disconnected and just kind of being numb. It's back to the whole piece that Shane touched on there, and I kind of go into this kind of thought process around human being versus human doing. So I'll give you an example. Like and I shared this with a workshop that I did recently. I was in the kitchen. I was working from home one day in the last couple of weeks, and I was at home in the kitchen at around 1 o'clock for lunch. I have a tuna fish sandwich in one hand. I've got the dog's bowl of food in the other hand. I'm closing the dishwasher with my right foot. Like, what? Why am I not sitting down, relax, and put a glass of water on the table and enjoy the tuna sandwich? And I could listen to the radio or read the sports news or whatever it is, but I'm trying to do three things at once. So that whole human being versus human doing, it's becoming like if I get hyper focused on something, or I'm just chasing and chasing and chasing, doing things, whether it's work or whether it's in the garden or whether it's around the house, that's a sign for me. It's a big sign for me to slow down and just get your breath back, stay in the present, and just get kind of grounded. So just to try and avoid that whole hyper focus piece. It's a big one, and look, there's a ton of stuff there. I suppose like the whole piece around self-belief. So if you're going through the thoughts of anxiety and you're feeling a bit stressed about, I don't know, whether it's something you're doing in work or the community or in your family, whatever it is, it's just have that self-belief piece and just getting grounded. Like an example I might share would be, say you're going to talk to one person tomorrow, so that's going to be something you're not going to probably overly stress about. Then the next day or whatever, the week after, you're talking to 5 people, you're thinking, oh God, that's going to get tricky now. And the week after, you're talking to 40 people, but it's still the same thing. You're still having a conversation. It's just words coming out of your mouth. Johnny Wilkinson describes that very well. He gives a great analogy of that, like when a rugby kicker kicks a 10 or 15 yard kick, it's just, they don't even think about it. They put the ball down, they kick the conversion or whatever it is, and the ball tends to travel whatever 30, 35 yards beyond the posts into the crowd. The next one then, I suppose, is if the ball's slightly further out and the self-doubt kicks in. You go, oh, I don't know, it's 25 yards out now. Will I make it? Oh, I'll make it. Bang. And it travels another 25. And then the final one, which is the one that really gives you self-doubt and you double check yourself, is the 45-yard kick, whatever. So he's thinking, oh no, self-doubt, major self-doubt. But the same technique, the same rhythm, the same flow happens. The ball will fly over the post and bang. That's the kind of analogy I always have in my head around self-belief, around talking at a workshop or going around doing something in the community. Have that self-belief in yourself, to pat yourself on the back, do the Mel Robbins, give yourself a high five in the mirror before you head off after you brush your teeth in the morning. So look, we're all doing a lot of stuff. We're all juggling things. The world is always going to give us something new, a new challenge today, tomorrow. So it's just around believing in yourself.
Yeah, really good, Carl. It kind of touched on what Shane was saying about like productivity, and you were touching on about doing 3 things at the one time, and trying our best to slow down. But how do we slow down? Is a question. Go on ahead. Sorry.
I mentioned non-negotiables. I mean, if I forego my non-negotiables, I don't know if I mentioned that. That's my thing, right? So if I forego my non-negotiables in the morning, it's whatever it is for everybody. It'll be different. I've got a Jack Russell. I'll bring the Jack Russell to the back garden. I'll have my shower. I'll have my fruit and fibre. I'll have a coffee with my wife. They're my non-negotiables. It's a slow start to the day. If I find myself skipping 1 or 2 of those aspects and flying into the day, that is then going to be a stressful. That's a stressful kind of start to my day, and that could put you off for the week. You could be chasing your tail. I know that's a personal example, but for me, the non-negotiables. I know we do cover that actually, Bill. You mentioned taking action program for our whole health and well-being. That's one of the aspects that was mentioned on that course. But it's something I've always kind of had a really good focus on, around just slowing down, being present. Staying in the moment.
Really good, really good. Does anyone else want to come in on that, even around slowing down when the world is just getting, I suppose, the fast pace of it, the productivity and everything else? Bill, Robert, or Shane? Do anyone want to come in? Bill, do you want to come in? Of course, yeah, no matter.
I find meditation great for slowing down, and like that there, sometimes you don't even notice the mind speeding up because you're focused on what you're doing, just like Carl said there. So your mind's speeding up, but then the signs of the stress things can start coming in. And what I find is, I would love to say I meditate every day, but I'm not disciplined enough. But I've learned over time that if I notice a stress building up, I start meditating every day, twice a day, morning, evening, as early as I can, because it takes a bit of time. It's like a kettle boiling. Even though I start meditating for at least 2 weeks, the stress will still start rising. And in the old days, I used to think, this is no good, this meditating, so I'll stop it. But now I know it'll take at least 2 weeks. But after that, I do start to notice the mind slowing down again. And that's what kind of really started to give me belief in meditating. And like, it's very simple meditating. It was just focusing on breathing or something that just slows the mind down. It's subtle, but it's so powerful. And I think that for me, that's been a great help. And I know, speaking to a lot of other people, that's one great way of slowing the mind down.
Brilliant. Thanks, Bill. Does anyone else want to come in, or we move on to the?
Yeah, I suppose
On
it's
ahead,
a bit
Rob.
of an it's a bit of an oxymoron, but in a sense, slowing down it actually takes a deliberate effort to some degree, and you have to work at it, which is kind of, you know. But like I say, I live in the countryside. I live on the family farm, and there's activities that I suppose since I started this role, I've learned to maybe take a bit more notice of some of the things that I'm able to do in the farm are actually they're quite beneficial for my own mental health. But if you're rushing and you're just looking at things as a chore, then they become the opposite. So there are times you just have to slow down and say, right, well, look, this is something I'm privileged to be able to do this on a daily basis. So instead of rushing at it like a bull at a gate, take some time and appreciate what's around me. But it does take a deliberate effort. It takes a shift in mindset. But yeah, it obviously the benefits
Yeah,
are there.
definitely, Robert. Yeah, just like you said, it takes effort and it takes, I suppose, awareness, conscious awareness, just to slow down as well. So that's really good. There is a question in the Q&A button there. I'll get to it in just a moment, but just to ask the attendees if they have any other questions, do just pop it into the Q&A button, and we might get to them in a couple of moments. So, because I just want to ask the next question, if that's all right with the panelists. So the question is, what makes it difficult for men to ask for help or open up on how they are feeling? So, Shane, will I go to yourself first? Will that be okay? Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's kind of what I spoke about earlier on. There's an idea growing up that, big boys don't cry, get up and get on with it. You know, men should be able to carry all these things on their own. Um, like we all know those things, what it means to be a man in certain ways, and how that impacts then. Well, if big boys don't cry and men don't really engage with a lot of emotional talk or encouraged to when they're younger, when you become an adolescent or in your early 20s, like you don't have that skill set to or language to articulate that. And I think there's a lot of great work being done in schools and in sports clubs and stuff at the moment in building that kind of emotional awareness with men. But I think that makes it very difficult to open up. And I think there's a lot of I think it's improving, but there's still a lot of stigma there around mental health. I think the idea of um, perceived public mental health is reducing. So perceived public mental health being the idea, do you think that the general public has less stigma around mental health? Most people would say yes. But then this idea of self-stigma, do people still stigmatize themselves over having mental health issues? I think that's still there. So we're shifting the dial publicly, but we need to shift that internal piece around how men feel about themselves around stigma. And then there's not only that idea of okay, it's difficult to experience these and the stigma of mental health, but then there's the stigma of seeking help because it's almost like a double burden. Well, not only were you not able, in inverted commas, to have a mental health problem, now you need help as well. It's just like, oh, your men should be able to get on with things on their own. So I think that's those kind of things that make it very challenging. I'm sorry, my internet keeps dropping. I think those two things make it very, very challenging for men to open up. But in my experience, it gets easier. It's like the first time you do it, it's extremely difficult to tell somebody that you're struggling. But the more you do it, there's almost like a weight lifted off your shoulder. It becomes easier to talk about it with be that with counselors or family or whatever. And like there's kind of again in my own personal experience, there's been a knock-on effect where people then come and open up to me because they've seen me talk about it with somebody else, and it pulls the barriers down until you realize that it is this kind of fake wall that's up between us all, like not talking about it. And of course, there are going to be incidences where you might open up and someone says something that they shouldn't, or some people will still carry stigma. But I think the pros outweigh the cons. I think you'll probably get a better response from most people. And just as well, the last thing I'll say, like I can't remember exactly the statistics, so don't quote me on them, but there is a study around the idea of men. If men were asked, would you help your friend if he was in distress around his mental health, most people would say yes, I would help him. But then when asked, do you think your friends would help you if you're in distress? Most men said no. So there's this idea that men would help others, but they feel no one would help them. And I think that's what we really need to change is that kind of perception.
That's really interesting, even around what you're talking around the self stigma and the public perception of stigma as well. Um, because again, if we are to open up to someone, if it could be just like you were mentioning, maybe it's a friend, family member, a counselor, whatever it may be, just the benefits of that for us as individuals, and then the positive effect it will have on us, rather than having the weight of all the emotion, thoughts burden us down. I think it's just so important for men just to feel okay to open up, and it could be just a one person that they can confide in just to offload, and that is the purpose of these conversations that we're
Yeah.
having around webinars and just general mental health promotion. You want to come in, Shane? Yeah, go on ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, and even just to say one more thing there, like, and then on the flip side of that, like, if people are to open up, people need to be there to listen. And I think as friends, as men, we jump into problem solving mode. Well, I know I do anyway. Like, do you know what you should do? You should do this. Oh, do you know what and like a lot of the time that's not helpful. Like people just want to talk. They want to explain how they're feeling. They might be frustrated. You know, unless they ask specifically, do you have any ideas what I could do here? I'd probably stay away from jumping in with an answer. Yeah, so I think this idea of just holding space is really important as friends, as dads, to be comfortable with silences, and they're not comfortable sometimes, but sometimes a great conversation will come out of that 30 seconds that you just sat there and held that space with someone. So yeah, and again, what I've often found helpful to go back to myself again, if there is someone who keeps jumping in to give answers, the next time I open up, I go, look, I just want to talk about this. I don't want any solutions. I just want to kind of tell you how I'm feeling today. And then
Yeah.
the person just says, okay, fine, yeah, like, and they're there, it becomes more supportive.
That's brilliant, Shane. You're absolutely right. It's just being able to listen and actively listen to the person as well, and not have the answers, but sitting in silence with someone is powerful. And give them that space, like you're saying as well. Bill, do you want to come in on the question? What makes it difficult for men to ask for help? And thanks, Shane, for all the insights there.
Yeah, I'd agree with a lot of what Shane said there. The self stigma and and the public health. I think there'll always be a bit of self stigma for everyone, men and women. We don't like. It's not easy, shall I say, sharing our dirty laundry in public. So I think that'll always be there. But for men, they're much more comfortable doing rather than being, uh, except whenever they have had to get help for a major crisis. Uh, I used to do addiction counselling, and when you see a man who has fallen on his knees and then gone for help and realised how much it's changed his life, how much it's helped him to grow himself. You know, it's it's fascinating because like that's how the whole AA movement grew up, and it's still going on today. And it's similar. I go every week to a grow meeting, and it's very much like this: lads chatting together about the real stuff in life, not about the World Cup, not about the weather, but meaningful stuff about themselves, and hearing other men chat about just honesty. And like whenever a man experiences that, it changes him. You see it at the grow meetings too, and I'm not saying everyone does it, but when they get it, that this is what life is about, trying to figure yourself out and also trying to help other people do the same on the way without doing like what Shane said, without that kind of oh, I'm going to fix you. You should do that. You should do the other. That doesn't really help. But just sharing stories, allowing yourself to be vulnerable and sharing the difficult side of yourself is, I would go as far as to say, it's a spiritual kind of thing. And again, that I'm only kind of taking a notion from they would say that addiction is a spiritual disease, in that you go through hell, but you come out the other side a better person, in that you have a huge self-awareness that you wouldn't have had you not gone through it. And so I think that's there for all of us. But it's up to each and every man to figure that out for himself, and how he does that. That's there's many ways to skin a cat. Each of us have to figure out it for ourselves, and it's nearly even harder for say men that don't necessarily go through a huge challenge in their life, because why would they bother changing anything when they're thinking, well, my life's working well? So there's a lot of interest and debate and all that area.
Brilliant. That's super, Bill. Lots of nuggets in there and insights. I conscious of time we're motoring on, which we're nearly coming close to the end. We have another couple of minutes. But Carol, I'll come to yourself, if that's okay, just on the question, and then we
Yeah.
might move on then to wrap up and then show the last couple of slides then, if that's all right.
Lovely. I can add some bits to that. Like Shane and Bill and Robert covered a good bit there. Like I would see the safe spaces as one of the hindrances to that difficult piece around asking for help. What are the safe spaces? Who are the people you're connected with? Who's in your tribe? And a big one that's very close to my heart is, who are your trusted people? Who can you trust? Who's the go-to you have? It might be one person. It could be many, or it could be none in your group, and you might need to reach out to one of the services out there. But who's that trusted person you can, like Bill said, you can open up your emotional side, you can open up your heart and have that honest conversation. There's a whole load of good nuggets out there. Like, I'll give you a real life example, but like Simon, what's the podcaster? Simon Sinek, I think it is. He has that thing around, who's that person you can text or whatever and ask for, do you have 8 minutes? I think that's his line, or whatever. Do you have 8 minutes? PJ Gallagher even referred to it. He has that person. He had a person at the end of the phone, a female friend that he got in touch with. He wasn't feeling very well. He reached out to that person, and she helped him a lot. I have a really, my background. I was talking to a friend of mine in New Jersey, a good pal of mine who's from Malahide, but he's moved over to New Jersey, and I was just saying to him, how do we have these conversations? We go deep, we go next level. Myself and himself have a very similar background with our families. Our parents separated us. We had the ability to able to share from a young age, and we still have chats about stuff, and we go deep on the call. We have a WhatsApp, whatever. But I've got a couple of other good friends, and like two, three, maybe, what was it, about 3.5 years ago, I literally got on the WhatsApp to a pal of mine that lives up the road here in County Meath, and I said to him, hey, would you have time for a cup of coffee? I want to run something by you. He probably didn't know what was coming, but when I arrived over, we had a cup of coffee, we had an ale croissant, and I had to do it like the lads were saying there. I had to just kind of get stuff off my chest and offload stuff that was building up in here, and that for me was absolutely golden. Like, it was golden in a sense. I was ruminating, I was procrastinating, things were spinning, and it just wasn't getting me anywhere, and I was putting things off, kicking the can down the road. But look, I suppose the nugget there for me, or the nugget for the group and for the people on the call, is just try and think, or have a consideration for who's that person in your corner who really wants to help you as a friend, or if there's a group or services that you can reach out to, and just kind of get to know. And I suppose that whole piece around who's in your tribe, and I would talk about this quite a lot, is, are they good for you, are they bad for you, or are they somewhere in the middle? Just understand who you're socializing with and understand what's in your group.
That's brilliant, Carol. Just looking for people in your tribe. I like that. If it's one person, a couple of people, having those people that you can just lean on from time to time, and that's super. I'm going to go to the question in the Q&A button. I'll just read it out, but we may not be able to answer it because it's around nutrition and food inputs. So I'll just read it out. Have you any comments on the nutrition food inputs affecting us? I just don't mean alcohol hangover, but sugar drops and caffeine spikes. I suppose it's probably impacts on mental health, I'd imagine, on alcohol and maybe caffeine. Was it caffeine and sugar spikes? Does anyone want to come in on that or any thoughts on it? Because I know myself that I enjoy coffee a lot and probably overconsume at times, but I feel, yeah, I don't know. I think definitely food and nutrition has an impact on our mental health. Eating healthy definitely makes me feel better. Nutritious vegetables, fruit, good protein sources, fiber, all that kind of stuff, and that definitely makes me feel better within myself. And then the opposite side is the takeaways and all those kind of things that are good in moderation, I suppose, from time to time. But again, the effect that they can have on mental health, they're being consumed day to day, week to week, is likely not going to make you feel good within yourself. I don't know. Does anyone else want to come in there on the question? It's just in the Q&A button there.
Well, I suppose I just would say, not a nutritionist or an expert, but I mean, in relation to stress, I mean, one of the signs for me as well of stress is that my eating habits and my diet can just go up the left, as it were, and become extremely unhealthy. Um, and that, yeah, I suppose that's more talking about a symptom, a negative aspect of our relationship with food, and many people, I'm sure, can agree with that.
Yeah, that's super. Thanks a million, Robert. So hopefully that answers. Again, I'm just going from experience really on the nutrition. Prior career was around personal training and well-being coaching in a prior many years ago, doing all that kind of stuff. So a little bit of knowledge around it, but again, it's hopefully that helps that person that asked the question. So coming close to the end, I want to ask another question. It is, what is one thing you're taking away from today's conversation? And then I have a final wrap-up question. So Bill, I'll come to yourself first.
The first thing that springs to mind is the self stigma and the public stigma. I've been thinking about that a lot lately in the last year, and so it was funny then whenever I heard Shane saying that, because that just puts words to what I was thinking. I do think that the there's no doubt about it that you can't go through a week without hearing mental health been mentioned on the radio or television and stuff like that. So we're opening up a lot on the kind of public side, but on the private side, the private stigma is around the way things are going with, in particular, what I see, social media, and where we're sharing more than we ever did, but we're not really connecting in a healthy way that I think that I would associate with growing. Where you come away from the conversations or the group conversations and you feel better in yourself. You don't see that at all on social media or things like that, and therefore, it's nearly like a contradiction where we're talking about mental health far more, isn't it great? Yeah, well, we are, but how are people getting any better? That's the bottom line. Are people getting any better, or is communication getting any better? What is relationship breakup like now in Ireland? Is it going down? Is it going up? What other indicators? Domestic violence rate, all kind of stuff like that would to me would be a good way of looking to see how are we doing on the personal front, on the self stigma, as we
Super.
said. So that's what
Yeah,
I'm taking away.
brilliant. Thanks a million, Bill. Carol, I come to yourself.
Yeah, there's loads that come to mind when you ask the question. Like, I suppose, like, we're talking about the social media. We're talking about, post COVID. What's the world look like? The world looks different, right? And I was at an event this morning in town, at a lovely event, and people were just coming up to the table and having conversations. For me, it's all about that. It's all about the human to human. We've missed that. Maybe we haven't missed it, but it's the more you get, the better. From my perspective, like. Out here where I'm living in North Dublin, we have a men's group. We meet every Tuesday. We just have a no agenda, no ego. Turn up if you want to turn up and have a chat, go for a walk and talk, and it's priceless. Like, I was walking around last night, Tuesday night, walking around Malahide Castle, and I was chatting to a fella about menopause, it's just having an open conversation and flowing and just back and forth and just chatting away. And so the human to human for me is number one. And the other one, I think I mentioned at the top of the hour, and I scribble a lot, so maybe journaling, but I scribble a lot and I just get stuff out of my head. But the whole piece around awareness plus action. So, like Bill said, we're hopefully we have self awareness. We're aware of what we need. What do you need right now? What's in it for you? What do you need to do for yourself right now? And then understanding what actions and what non-negotiables work for you. So they're kind of my couple of takeaways.
Brilliant. That's great. Thanks a million, Carl. Shane, I'll come to yourself, and then Robert, I'll come to you lastly.
Yeah, first of all, a big reflection is like, isn't it great to have five guys online talking openly about their mental health and what keeps them well? I mean, like that's just really powerful, and these conversations need to keep going. So I'm just privileged to be a part of today. When we talk about men's health as well, we tend to talk about masculinities, and masculinities inevitably goes to the idea of toxic masculinities, which I don't like using that phrase because it means masculinity is inherently toxic, which it isn't. But on the flip side of that, when you think about masculinities and the negative aspects of it, well, what does healthy masculinities look like? What does masculinities look like? What does positive masculinities look like? And I think the conversations that we had today kind of start to answer some of those questions. So, we talked about giving yourself, being kind to yourself, giving yourself space and giving other people space, collaboration and connection with other people, keep learning, being curious about yourself and others, noticing things around you, slowing down. They're very aligned with the 5 ways of well-being, but also they're not inherently masculine values. They're just being a good person, being a curious person, being a human. So sometimes when I think about that, what does it mean to be a man? Well, what's it mean to be a healthy man? It's just these human values that we should all aspire to, rather than associating them with masculinity or femininity. So I suppose that's just a takeaway from the conversation today.
That's lovely. Thanks, Shane. You're right. It's great just to have these conversations for 5 lads to be chatting around men's health and men's mental health. The more the merrier these that can continue to happen, which is great. Robert, I'll come to yourself, and then I'll just share the last couple of slides. Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose that, as already has been said, I think what I take away from this is just the importance of having space like this. It's not a topic I would have actually sat down and had a conversation much about myself, emotional strength, and the importance to have a space like this. I have recently had the privilege of being part of the Men's Sheds program that was rolled out. It was rolled out in Cavan and Monaghan, which is a national program for the of training for the Men's Sheds, where different agencies come in, the Heart Foundation, Cancer Society, the Men's Shed, other agencies come in and talk about nutrition, food, all sorts of things, and I delivered the talks on mental health and well-being. And in that space, in the Men's Shed, in the right space, there is opportunity to talk, and people will talk, and that's vitally important. So it's about creating that space and what it takes. And in that, I suppose, what creates that space is, well, trust for a start. Is one thing, but also just in that owning that space where you can then be comfortable to talk. So those are all things that we need to value those spaces and provide more of those spaces so that we can keep the conversation going.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thanks, Robert. Thanks a million. And I am just going to get up the last couple of slides because we're coming to the end. I shared the workshops, or what I was going to show there in a second. So this is some of the Mental Health Ireland workshops that we do in the community and workplaces. These are all on the Mental Health Ireland website as well, mentalhealthireland.ie. So if anyone wants to learn more or book a training, you can go on there. My email is killian@mentalhealthireland.ie if you want to follow up with anything. So they're just some examples of the trainings and the workshops that we do in the community and workplaces. So then we have our national campaigns. So the Hello, How Are You was one which was recent enough in the 15th of May. Just, I suppose, to normalise conversations around mental health and ask people, hello, how are you, and actively listen to the answer. Mental Health Month then will be the next one upcoming on the whole, we do like events, webinars and workshops across the whole month of October, and we mark World Mental Health Day then on the 10th of October. Connectmas, it's a Christmas one, a bit of time away from that, but it's a one where we do to, I suppose, reduce isolation and loneliness around Christmas, and webinars during the lead up to Christmas around that time, and lots of resources go on the Mental Health Ireland website as well. So that is the last slide, and just I suppose what I want to do is just pass to Shane. I know you had a link for men's health counselling. You were, if you want to share anything on that, I don't know, did you put it in the chat there already? Just
Yeah,
check in.
thanks, Gillian. I just put it in the chat there, so people might not be aware. Last year, Minister Butler announced funding for specifically for men's health counselling, and so every man in Ireland is entitled to 6 free counselling sessions with a referral through GP. I think in the next couple of months that will change, that there won't need to be a referral through the GP as well. It can be self-referral. But all the information about those counselling services are available via the yourmentalhealth.ie/.
Perfect.
Web.
Sorry, just breaking up there a small bit, Shane. Sorry. Yeah,
So
that's brilliant. So, yeah, no better. Yourmentalhealth.ie/men is perfect. So, I just want to wrap up and just thank all of the panelists. It's been a really good discussion. I've really learned a lot from all of you, and hopefully, the attendees that joined us took a lot on board around men's health, men's mental health, and just maybe can use it going forward. This, like I was saying at the start, this is recorded, so it will be available hopefully by the start of next week on the Mental Health Ireland YouTube channel. I hope you have a good rest of the day, and again, we might see you at another webinar in the future. So we'll leave it there. So thanks again, thanks to all the panelists, and we'll see you again soon.
Cheers.